Live from Las Vegas, we are back with another episode of the Community Hour. Hope everybody's doing great today. Got a legend in the community on our show today, Mr. Jake McKee, the community guy, or Jake, the community guy. McKee's coming to the stage, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from around the world. Yes, we are live and recording. We are here in Las Vegas. So I'm going to bring Jake up to the stage. Before I bring him out like a Jimmy Fallon would bring a guest, I don't have the curtains to do it. We don't have that cool stuff in our tech yet. So today we are here to celebrate Jake McKee, learn from them, buckle up, strap in. Here we go. So Community5 CEO Jake McKee is a 20 plus year veteran of the online community industry. They have led efforts at Lego and Apple, driven community social strategy as a partner at Community5, and founded Ant's Eye View, a successful boutique social media strategy agency. They are also behind this amazing effort called Dinner 5. Let's get up to the stage, Mr. Jake McKee. Jake, how's it going?
Hey, good. I feel like if this is a Jimmy Fallon entrance, I need to hey, wave at the audience. Hey, everybody. Hey.
I know it's like the old tradition of like they'll read off like the points of who the guest is, then they open up the curtains, and then I was messing it up. So then I would like have the people come out, then it would like kind of stop. So I was like, oh man, I'm doing it. I got to do it like the talk shows do it, right? So that's
That's right.
So that's
If
the
I didn't realize we were doing it talk show style. I would have poured the bottle into a mug. Give some mystery to what I was drinking today.
Oh my God. It's just such an honor to have you on today. It's like one of the first kind of professionals that really kind of branded and built themselves as kind of a community subject matter expert, community go to. And just throughout the years, I mean, you've touched so many people's lives and helped people or given advice or pep talks and all this stuff. So it's just an absolute honor to have you on the show today.
No, thanks. I appreciate it. And yeah, you've been around pretty long as well. I know we've run into each other a bunch of times over a bunch of years.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I was just like, when I started out, like the biggest problem that I had was that there was no forgot password feature, and most people didn't even have like email addresses. So it's like, oh my God, like what are we gonna do? Because just the call volume, that was the only way for people to get their passwords to log in. So it's like, thinking of the problems then and now, it's like, yeah, we got problems, but it's so much nicer, right?
Yeah, and I've joked for years that my introduction as a community professional is, "Hi, I'm Jake McKee. I've been doing community since that meant convincing clients to put an email address on a website." And there's this moment of pause that everybody always goes, "Well, why would that be a?" Yeah, okay, I think I get that, because there was a period of time I was doing this work around community back in, geez, I started doing web in 98 full time. In college before that, as a side gig. But yeah, my first job in web development, which of course I immediately went to, how do we get better, interaction with site users. When I started telling clients about, hey, people want to reach out to you, they want to engage with you in some way. We're going to put an email address on a website. Oh my God, what happens if they contact us? Then you reply? I don't understand the question, but that was a surprisingly common question in 1998.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, a lot of the stuff. What are some of like your earliest memories of community back when you first started, like the tech stack? Like what jumps out at you when you think back on kind of like earlier times?
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of times when I have conversations with folks about, being around in community since the early days, they go, "Oh, like 2012." No, keep going. "Oh, like 2006 when Twitter started." No, keep going. Uh, I joined Lego in 2000, and um, they had just built the previous December 1999. They had started the Lego Direct group, that was is kind of consolidated all the direct to consumer activities, right? The at home catalog, the website, the direct to consumer product line, and fulfillment, a few other things. But they were they were building websites. I came in as a senior web producer, and pretty quickly I had this other second full-time job of community engagement with the adult consumers. And after about a year and a half, maybe a little longer, of doing two full-time jobs, I went to my boss finally and I said, "Hey, man, I can't do two full-time jobs anymore. I just need to focus on the community side." And he said, "Great, I've been waiting for you to ask. Come on in, let's figure this out." So, I sort of put 2001 was really the full time, but 2000 I started really engaging with the adult Lego fans and realizing that there was a lot of value to be had, for the business for them. It's where I developed my "everybody goes home happy" mantra, right? That you don't have to have the same thing that makes you happy. You just have to be honest about what it is, and be respectful of helping the other person achieve their goals too, right? Which in a lot of ways, revolutionary concept for years, and still is in some ways, because there's this mindset that in order for us to be good at community, uh, we have to make it all about the community member and not at all about the company. The customer is always right means that we only think about the customer. No, that's not right either, because we can't continue to deliver great products and great community efforts and activities if there's no funding. There's no company, right? Everybody has to win in this process. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey since 2000 through being at Lego, leaving and starting a couple of smaller consultancies that I then merged into my partnership with Sean O'Driscoll around Anti-View, which we sold to Price Waterhouse. Left there after a few years, as I was there as a partner after we sold, and left and started running the Apple Global Support community for a while. And when I left there, went back to what is now rebranded as Jake McKee Consulting. But yeah, just one-man shop doing a lot of really great stuff with clients around community. I call myself the Mr. Wolf of the community industry at this point. I sort of fix anything that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's tough to, like, when you've done like so many, you can just see patterns when you come in, either internal structures or just what the community is doing. You can read the tea leaves so good, and it's like, I don't know what that skill is, because I was thinking about that yesterday as well. It's like kind of like with our experience just coming in, we're seeing things like in 2 days that other teams may not ever see, and just there's like these patterns
Right.
that you pick up. That's amazing. Yeah. And one other
Yeah,
kind
and
of,
some of that. Oh, go ahead.
I know you got it. Floor is yours.
Well, I was going to say part of that, for me, yeah, I had a conversation. I was in a client interview as part of a assessment project. I was doing a client interview yesterday, and they were talking about their support background and what some of the problems were. And I started predicting in advance what they were going to say, and they're like, "How do you know this?" I've seen this over and over again, right? That this is uniquely you, yet common to the industry, right? Your situation is somewhat unique, but this type of dynamic I've seen countless times in the last 20 years, right? We know, generally speaking, how patterns work, and part of it is that it's easier for me to see it not being part of it. That's the value of bringing in somebody from the outside to do the work that I do, the work that you're doing, is that it's a lot easier to see what's happening outside the relationship, so to speak, right? It's why therapists are a thing. If you could figure out your own problems in your own relationships, you just solve them. Sometimes you can't really see them until somebody goes, "Hey, I'm seeing this thing. Have you ever noticed X, Y, and Z?" And both the partners go, "Holy hell, yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't thought about it that way before," right? And as soon as you hear it and see it, oh yeah, it's obvious. And but that consultancy work is valuable because it's an outside perspective, like you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like you kind of you've already lived the book or seen that movie, so you're like,
Right.
the White Walkers are
Right.
coming, and the company's like, is everything good? Do we get it all set up? You're like,
Yeah.
no.
It's a little chilly in here.
Yeah, it's like what's the structure? What's the model? How are you doing things? And then they're like, oh wow, it's like, I know how this book ends, and yeah, it's like for so many people. And I think one of the interesting things I was also going to talk about like in the earlier days, one of the toughest challenges, at least for me, was, and I got a little bit lucky because we had big trade shows like every 3 months, so I still could get in like FaceTime, which
Right.
wasn't normal. But one of the biggest challenges is was just keeping momentum going, right? So we didn't have like the Zooms and all this other stuff, right? The Slacks, the Discords per se. There
Right.
was definitely message boards and things like that, which were great. But it's like you would do an event or in person, and there's so much, you get people excited, and then it was like, how do you keep the momentum going? And so just with that kind of tech stack
Mhm.
and tooling, then what were some of the ways that you're able to kind of just keep the engagement and momentum going? So you did something really great and exciting. For some companies, they had like maybe a user conference once a year. And then it's like, oh
Mhm.
crap, how do we keep these people just as excited and as engaged the next 11 months till we come back here?
Yeah, and let me take a step back, 'cause it's funny
Sure.
you're talking about this at this particular point in my timeline, because my girlfriend and I were talking just a couple of nights ago about uh, when I say the word industry friend, what that means, and it's I going back for a second, this idea of, there was these industry conferences over and over again. I mean, geez, to your point, I feel like I was in Vegas every 3 months for some particular conference that was happening. And through that, I met a lot of folks that, I may have only seen them a few times, uh, at those conferences. But when I saw them, hey, so good to see you. Very connected, right? And there was some amount of email, online engagement, some community we were connected through, whatever it might have been, on a blog that I hosted back in the day on my community guy site, right? Whatever it might have been. Um, and it's interesting because at that time, that relationship was a very specific type of relationship, and I didn't realize how unique, maybe, I don't know what the right word is, unique, let's say, that relationship was, until I was trying to explain it to Lacey, and she's like, what do you mean industry friend? Like, what was happening? But this idea that, like, you and I feel like, we're friends, right? We're bonded. We've known each other for years. You reached out the other day, said, hey, be on this thing. I said, sure, cool. We show up, and here we are talking, right? But it's odd in a lot of ways, because also we haven't seen each other in person in years. We talked online back and forth in email a few times. Back in the day, we saw each other, but not frequently or regularly. We didn't live in the same town. But man, if I think about the most important people in my life, a good percentage of those people are folks like you, right? Some of my people I'd consider some of my closest friends are through this community connection piece. And it I think that, as we all as old folks look back at our early days and say, there was something really cool about those early days. That is something I looked fondly back on at this, midlife point I'm at, and thinking, man, back in those days, that was, we were figuring stuff out on the fly. We'd show up and see a session at a community conference, and 9 of the 10 sessions you'd watch were brilliant and revolutionary because you just hadn't thought about those topics before. And as soon as you heard them, you went, here's 2 things to do differently tomorrow. And then you'd go back and do those 2 things tomorrow. And then you'd tell that person, hey man, thanks for that. I did these 2 things just because you of your speech, right? It was a really close knit, connected community. Um, and it's funny. It's like web development now. Web development's such a different thing that, I've done a bunch of stuff in my life with coding, and run my own websites. And at one point early in the blogging days, I built my own blogging platform, and then ended up selling it to somebody for a very small amount. That got me started down my self-employed path. Um, but I couldn't do that these days, right? Things have progressed so far that my ability to be a web developer back then was easy because it was so new and we were figuring things out. Expectations were from users were relatively low, not of quality, but just of scope, right? And now I couldn't. I mean, I'm not anything close to a web developer. I couldn't walk in and start doing what these guys do because it's so progressed beyond, right? Uh, and but it's an interesting question about, like, how do you keep engagement? And I think part of it is figuring out, for me, and this is the dinner 5 connection, part of it is figuring out how to keep those groups small and intimate, right? How do we capture the magic of when you really know somebody because you're sharing, not know somebody because you work next to them in a cube every day, right? Dinner five is my 5-person monthly dinner activity. Lunch now through the pandemic. I went virtual and ended up kind of bouncing the time frame around depending on the stage of the pandemic. But we're doing a lunchtime activity now. But it's a very small group, which creates an ability to have a cone of silence conversation, right? There's no NDA, there's no agreement in advance of what you can or can't share, but it is let's talk openly here. And, I curate the group to make sure that there's colleagues aren't in the same group. There's nobody from, no two people from the same company. Try and get them in similar industries as much as possible, or at least good connection potential, so that people really feel comfortable talking and opening up and sharing. And, it's been really interesting how much people actually open up when there's space to do so. If it was all about me, this is the everybody goes home happy thing, right? If it's all about me and I'm like, I want to get my name out there to as many people as possible, I'm going to have a 500-person event. Oh, I can get 5,000. I'm going to do 5,000. It kills the vibe, right? It becomes an entirely different kind of event with an entirely different set of engagement styles. But when I break it down into 5, what's really happening for me? I'm meeting potential clients, a big part of what makes me happy. I'm giving back to the community that I've gotten so much out of over the years. That's also for me and for them. And they're getting the ability to really meet and get real issues discussed, right? I can, a member of the event can show up and say, man, I am just struggling with my boss. They don't understand this and this. What do you guys suggest? Have you ever run into this? And somebody in that group is going to say, almost always says, oh, I've been there. Here's what I did. And somebody else goes, well, I wasn't exactly there, but based on what you're saying, I can give you this other bit of data. And it's a real honest, intimate, connecting conversation. And I think in some ways, the power of social media is it can get everybody, right? Your Facebook page has 1,500 followers and your Twitter stream has 3,000 followers and you're following, 20,000 people on Instagram and on and on and on. But who are the small group of people that you really connect with, get things from, and that's one of the big questions I have when I talk to clients about, hey, you want a community strategy? Great. Are you willing to include small group activity, offline activity as part of the larger footprint of community activity? Or is this just you trying to put in place a discussion forum, right? Because obviously I have a belief that one works better than the other.
Yeah. And it's, and somebody was like, how does Jake get this magic with Dinner 5? And it's like, we're doing all these meetups, but it's just not even the same, right? And it's like, as community professionals, you're also like architects, right? There's stuff that organically happens, but other times we're like architecting, like to basically tee it up so these moments of serendipity do happen. Like almost like an event planner, it's like we have to be able to create these situations, architect them, tee them up in a way so that they can actually happen. So you're creating a space and an environment, where these kind of moments can happen versus just like, hey, let's get everybody to meet at random, like every other Friday. And there's no real just kind of structure. Just hop into a Zoom, and it's just a totally different thing. And it's almost like as kind of more as you get really into your community career, you start to really think about how you're architecting these things. I'm not getting these moments. If I'm not getting them organically, am I doing anything to tee them up so that these moments of serendipity could even like happen? So it's like so amazing.
And I think Lori's comment.
Okay.
Yeah, Lori's comment. Lori says it sounds like it's a safe space to be vulnerable. We really need them now more than ever. And yeah, that's exactly right. Right. It's this idea of vulnerability and timing. And I think, Blake, to your point, where I think a lot of people, I always call it the professor business hat. If you've seen the Lego movie, right, that you put the professor business hat and you turn on and you turn into something much more cold and corporate, right? The reality is what we're doing here is trying to personalize and humanize the actual engagements and interactions, right? There's a lot of stuff, as we all know, if we've ever worked at a company and designed products, there's a lot of thought that goes into what do customers want. We've talked to them, we've surveyed them, we've met with them, we've done all that sort of thing. But how does that turn into a representation that that's true? how do we do that? I don't know, and part of that is being flexible enough to do the thing that you need to do at the moment you need to do it, right? Even if that means to say, oops, our bad, or, hey, we're working on it and it's really hard. The thing you've asked for, we absolutely have on our backlog where it's prioritized, but it is a damn hard task to do. We're working on it. We'll let you know. A month out, hey, we're still on it. Sorry, we understand you're frustrated, and we haven't forgotten about you. Versus a lot of engineering teams are like, don't talk about anything until we're done, right? There's this vulnerability piece that we have to bring in. But from a Dinner 5 standpoint, the interesting thing about the event is the best. So I ran it for a year. I started in January 2019. All right, 2018, 2019. 2018. But I ran it for a year basically until the pandemic hit, and had to go virtual. And I talked a minute ago about the kind of the stages of the pandemic and how it affected. The very first 3 or 4 Dinner 5 after the pandemic started, everybody showed up, and it was like, oh my God, are we all going to live? Like, there wasn't hardly any community conversation happening. But there was something valuable about just being in a space, talking about something that worried them in a very broad sense, with people that they knew had some familiarity to their own personality, background, interests, whatever. They didn't talk a lot about background, personality, and interest and community needs and their careers and all that stuff. It was just an assumed, if you're here, we're kind of all on the same page, which means I can open up in ways and be vulnerable, to Lori's point, in ways that weren't possible maybe in other parts of their life, right? And after the first 4 months, when things started to get a little bit more normalized, and it wasn't just kind of hair on fire, everybody running around the room and swinging from the chandeliers about what's happening with COVID, and we started to get some level of understanding of it. I don't want to say comfort with it at that point, but once we got into summer and early fall, there was a big switch where everybody wanted to come in and say, how are you doing? How are your communities doing? Right? It was still very personal. It brought in community dynamics, but almost more in the, are you maintaining? Are you okay? Right? Not just, I want to talk about the fears, but I want to talk about how the fears are affecting us. Then it moved into, okay, what do we do about how this new reality is our new reality? When people can do Zooms, what are you doing in that relation, right? And then stage 4 was much more about, I'm tired of talking about this. I just want to talk about nothing but because I'm so tired of talking about everything else related to COVID and all that stuff. So it was still very COVID related, because they were going, please let me take this away from that. And then we sort of, stage 5 was where we're at now, right? Which is everybody's dealing with this. It's new normal, and we're kind of back to a new normal, but normal nonetheless. And the point of this whole story is that I didn't try and shove the community dynamic into each one of those stages, right? And it became very clear after the first session, in the March session, it became very clear that I was going to have to follow the lead of the members, not sort of come up with an agenda that was beneficial to me, in my new business efforts or my give back efforts or my community focused growth of the industry efforts. I needed to be able to focus on what was happening with them in real time to create that safe space Lori was talking about, right? Because it's not safe if I'm driving it from my needs, right? It has to be collaborative. It's that everybody goes home happy thing. And just a fascinating case study of what can happen. And, that period of time, especially the early on period of time, some of the most active, engaged members that we still have, the ones that promote us the most, the ones that are excited to come back the most, the ones that have shared out the event the most, are the ones that came during that period of time, because we made some difference in their life, right? And this is where so much of community, I know I'm rambling here a little bit, but so much of community to me, from a personal why I do this job standpoint, is because I'm trying to have some impact on somebody's life. I'm not trying to sell a product. I'm trying to sell a product that they love, that brings them a passion and joy, that gives them an ability to connect with others, whatever it might be, right? Whatever the thing is that I'm trying to do. It's not just from the business standpoint. It is a very, everybody goes home happy mantra. I want to sell products, absolutely, but I want to sell products in a way that makes people excited, that gets them to, have a greater identity, a better depth of fun, whatever it might be, right? And Lori says this would be an outstanding way to connect with key community members and touch antenna. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the, back to the making small groups possible, right? The best super user sessions I have in practice are the ones that are, small and in person. You get that once a year thing to happen, whether it's on the back of another event or we just pull, our top 10 super users and say, hey, meet us in London. We're all going to be there. Those are the sessions that really you can see that, things are growing, connection's good, and then spikes, then growing, then the next year it's spike. How do you get them in that same room for that personal connection, right?
Yeah, and it's a couple of points there. It was like, I mean, just dinner for five. It's like when I started out, it was like just there were no like groups like CMX, Community Roundtable, and none of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd go out to like all these trade shows early on, but there was no other like community professionals. Granted, everyone's talking extranet, social networks. Really, someone saying community wasn't really as much of a thing then. And it really wasn't until like maybe, I don't know if it was like 5 or 6 years when I started going to South by Southwest Interactive. And then the night before, they would do this big party on this big giant back porch in Austin on the Gingerman, which I think is, I don't even know if Gingerman's still open. I think they closed down this whole like backyard area that they used to have in the warehouse, but it's like all of Interactive was there, and I could find other people like for the first time in 5 to 6 years that were like where you had that Spider-Man moment, like where everybody's pointing like you're talking about, and it was like so amazing. And then it was like then the .com bust happened, and it's like where did everybody go? But so that was kind of interesting in terms of just we almost like take it for granted that now it's like everybody can connect, so which is just a amazing thing, and just to be able to share these stories with other people. Anybody doing that kind of work is like, it's like doing God's work. So just bless you for doing that for people out there, because it is like, in the early days we had nothing like that.
Yeah, and it's funny. I had forgot. I was having my brain was literally trying to place where Gingerman was downtown because it's been a while since I've been to that one. Because I live in Austin. But
Right
what's funny about that
is
yeah, and as soon as I remembered where it was, and you were talking about the back patio, I remember those events where all the people doing social media were in town. Not all of them, obviously, but a huge chunk of the group of people that would call themselves, community or social media professionals were there. And that's a really small back patio. This isn't a convention center style space, right? It was a pretty small restaurant back porch. And that's part of that dynamic I was talking about earlier, is how much, we knew everybody, and everybody called up everybody and said, hey, I'm stuck. What do I do? Right. And the give freely, the vibe of how much help I got from others, the willingness of people who, had some notoriety in the community to just answer questions if I needed a question answered. One of my favorite people in the world is Derek Pauzak, that wrote Designing for Communities. One of the first community books I ever read, and I read it and was just blown away by it. Very good book. And, had a lot of really great ideas in it that I hadn't at that point thought of. Things like hide the post button, right? The harder you make it to post, the more valuable the content's likely going to be when it does get posted, because you slow people down from posting. And I was just like, what? Hide the post button? I thought we were supposed to be putting it everywhere, right? At one point I was at South by and said, hey, I want to introduce myself. I'm a big fan of your work. It's great. And we ended up, staying in touch and being friendly, maybe not friends, but, friendly for years. And every once in a while I get stuck on something. I drop a note. He'd kindly respond. It was such a good way of doing business that I've tried very hard to continue that, and do a lot of mentoring, accelerator coaching, and especially in this time right now where we're seeing community managers get laid off, do everything I can to help give advice on how to craft a good resume story, pitch yourself, all that stuff, right, to really help push the industry. But this is the value of the small that I think a lot of people nostalgically look back on when things were smaller and say, boy, I sure wish it was like then. it's not really about, I mean, I like that we have so much better tools and options and capabilities now. I just, sometimes I miss being able to fit all of this on the back porch, and no matter what you're doing or what company you're at, your Hamp at Flickr, and Flickr is an awesome company at the time, and you can just walk right up and say, "Hey, I got a question." She's like, "Cool, let's answer it." Right? Like, it's such a great vibe.
Uh, yeah, it was kind of just being from Texas and having so many people from San Francisco, and they talk like so fast. So I just had it like stepping into Gingerman's like, okay, just get into that fast talking mode again, and you just have like it was like speed dating,
Right.
going around talking, and it was like the who's who, the WordPress founders would be there, and anybody you wanted to talk to, just
Mhm.
straight to the source, and everybody was like so generous. There were no like egos or
Right.
anything, or and people would like, oh, I don't have time today, but find me some other time during the convention, and we'll have a chat. So it was just such a amazing time. And one of the things, just I know we don't have like hours to talk about today, is that I really want to talk about is like these super user, super fan programs. And so for a lot of companies, what I'll see is they'll kind of do like I'm trying to think of a word which won't get me in trouble, or people go like, I know who Blake's talking about. But they'll do like these groups of customers that meet maybe twice a year or 4 times a year, and they're like, box checked. We've got our super fan, super user program. There's
Mhm.
no real clear like what types of people trying to get that want to like create content, create stuff. And it was kind of weird. Like in the early days, I like was getting all our like super users, but the thought never even crossed my mind to do like a super fan program, right? Even doing like an award program, but I was doing it annually. I was like, oh, I wish I just thought to do that like monthly.
Right.
But I was like, early on, it was like it was a natural instinct to like find ways to connect with these super users. But then the other part was like, now that you got them, right? You've got this person, but they have like specific tracks they want to do. You can't just be like, here's it. This is the only thing you can
Mhm.
get. You want to like yacht, we're just going to make you like a line cook, right? It doesn't kind of like work that way. So once you reel them in, people are like, oh, we just don't know how to find them. But then they get them. Then it's like, okay, well, what program, what tracks do you have to sort of then where to kind of propel them forward, right? And so then the super user group's like,
Right.
wait a minute, this is a great way to do it. But then it's like, what's the model, the purpose, right? Is this kind of like, tailored just for like bloggers, just for people that like want to speak? Kind of the general ones are, we can do that too, but kind of knowing like what it is versus just like, I see so many companies just like super users of something, check the box. And you're like, what are the users? And they have to like read, okay, we've got Jimmy, Sally. And it's like, but it wasn't the point to be like really intimate where you're just like all these people. It's like a so it's like, man, so it's just from your perspective, what were those kind of early, because I believe it was at Lego, when did you first start like thinking about like kind of like super user, super fan programs, and what were those kind of like early thoughts of the journey to you for until like actually doing it like in the real world?
Yeah. So this is I love super users. It's part of, if I had to pick an area of community in general to focus on, that'd probably be the one to do. So you've definitely hit the passion point nerve here. But I think it's important to contextualize first and foremost what we mean when we say super users, right? Because a lot of people will talk about that as uh, really a customer advisory board, right? Where, to your point, they get a random selection or a particularly chosen select of people in place for product feedback. Yeah, maybe that'd be something. We also see the customer advisory boards, cabs, that go way, 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 way back, where a company will bring in its most either biggest customers or potentially biggest customers. They'll fly them all in, pay for it, to fly them to Miami to go to a golf resort for the weekend. They'll pay for their golf. They'll pay for the wife's massages while they're there, and then they have dinners while they're there, and then there's some level of look how much we treat you well, and therefore you want to buy with us, right? There are um, there are people who really are talking about super users from how much money they spend. In the community context, I always talk about super users as your most prolific, most active. most passionate users. What you do with them from a programmatic standpoint is the second question, right? So, in an online forum, we commonly see that as a gamification function, right? So, the people who've earned more than X number of points or X number of badges, they are in the super user category. They get the super user badge because they've done so much content on the site. Other people, it may be less about, just pure points oriented growth, and it may be, we have found 5 people that we're going to put into a special group, and we communicate with them more directly and more frequently, because they are, points totals aside in the gamification system, they are the most passionate users, right? And I have a client that recently launched a community, and they built a group like that that's not really based on, because you have X number of points, you automatically earn access. It's more about, wow, we've got 5 people who really get the dynamics. Cat keeps jumping up trying to participate today. We have 5, we get 10 people that kind of represent who we want to be as we grow up, right? And we empower them with nothing more than direct access to us and some updates on what we're working on, right? And that sort of fuels their power. And so I think, I'm going through all this because I think it's really important to get the definitions right, and to get them to be shared, right? Had 2 cats and both of them are attacking from either side, because if you don't really understand who you're talking about, you can't understand what kind of programs to talk about, and you can't understand what's actually of value to anybody, right? I've been in engineering centric companies before, where we start talking about super users, and the immediate response is, well, no, why do the people that have the most admin access have any value here? I'm not talking about people as super user in your technical systems. I'm talking about within your community. So, okay, let's talk about super fans then, right? Or some other word, right? That makes sense. Back to your point. Here's one of the kitties. This is Olive. Laura, if Marcelo comes back here at some point, I'll get him in the session too. So if you go talk about Lego's interesting, because in the 6 years I was there, I didn't build a piece of technology. The fans did that already, right? I walked into an environment where they had built their own forums, organized their own events, built their own technology tools for doing 3D CAD modeling of Lego models. My job and my budgets didn't need to go to recreating the wheel and trying to force them into something that they weren't already active in. My job was to get out and to support them. So 60% of my budget went to travel, just pure travel cost, hotel, airlines, rental cars, food, right? Like that was 60+% of my budget. The rest of it was almost all swag, right? A lot of that swag was, again, to promote what they were doing already in their events. So when I talked about super users, in a way, I was talking about that entire adult community. The entire adult community was the super users of the overall Lego community that included everybody out there, right? Adults that built but didn't participate in the community, kids, teens, students, teachers, whoever it might be. They were my super users, but they weren't traditional super users. And I didn't treat them in a traditional super user program, sequestered from everybody else, elevated from everybody else kind of way. It was just, this is what I was doing. And through that, right at the end of my tenure there, I built a couple of programs, the user group network, and the ambassador program. I think the ambassador program is still around, but I know that they've really taken the user group model and really blown it out. And what that whole goal was rather than me trying to talk to every person at every group that existed about all the stuff we wanted to do, the idea was, okay, there's plenty of groups formed up. There's a network of those that exist already. I'm going to work with them, and I'm going to work with representatives from that group, right? So you guys send 1 or 2 people to the table, so to speak. I'll work with them, the company will work with them as a representation of the entire user group behind them. It means that we can do more because we have less conversations, really, right? The scale becomes much more manageable. And it encouraged other people to set up other user groups in places that we didn't have user groups that exist at that point, because that's the best way for us to get connected to Lego, right? You want to do a bulk parts order, order a bunch of, red 1x2 plates. You want to order 10,000 of those because you got some crazy project you're working on. Excellent. This is the way you do that. You go through the user group network structure. But that wasn't super users per se. I had representatives. I wouldn't call them super users. They were just the representatives for that year, and the next year they might put up 2 different ones. But the way that we were treating that whole community and the way we were structuring it was about, we're going to give you special attention, right? Special treatment based on what you're doing. In other communities that I've worked on, you go out of your way to, the Apple support community, for instance, once you earned a certain number of points, you were basically granted the option of joining the super user program. That was, in that case, it was about 200 people. In my day, I don't know what it is now. It was about 200 people that were top points earners through this on-site gamification. Some of them have been there 15 years earning those points, right? Others have been there just a few years, but all of them, you had to be there for a while to participate. And they get, they had a private group that we could talk to them through. We did extend an invitation to them to come join us we did a couple of them when I was there. London was one of them, for instance, where we had about 15 people show up on their own time, show up and spend the night, spend the evening with us, I should say, hanging out and talking about what's coming up and what we're doing with the site, and what we know about things we could share, which wasn't much. It was Apple, about what was coming to the company, but a lot of it was really, tell us what your concerns are, tell us what you need. We've implemented this new tool. How's it working for you? We had a separate, an extra bit of functionality that we added to the site to help them manage their queues of what they wanted to follow and answer and all that sort of stuff based on their interests and capabilities and whatnot. So, we added that extra layer on for them that was just relevant for them. But, that's a more traditional forum super user program. So, it's all over the place is my point. It could be anything. But that's why it's so important to really get your definitions right, get your strategy dialed in a clear and understandable way, and then largely stick to it, not be bouncing all over saying, well, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, and let's just get everybody together. But, taking it out of the hands of letting the event team or the marketing team own it, and then making sure the community team owns those activities with the help of events, for instance, to support actually going and making the event happen. But because it's, we've probably both been through this dynamic where you get an events person that comes in and says, hey, here's all the stuff we're going to do. And you're going, well, you've built 0 time in for them to actually talk to each other. And I want 80% of this session to be this time together to be talking to each other. Right? What do you mean? We need structure. We need agenda. How are we supposed to plan? We don't. We plan some blocks, and then they do what they want within them.
That's like almost like 99. I'm not as much. I don't be too like hyperbole, but almost like 99% of like the cabs and kind of these super paying programs that I see with companies, they'll get them. They'll meet. It's not only that they don't. There's no ways for the members to have closer ties, right? Where you can actually bond in those kind of amazing ways. They'll meet like 4 times or once a year, but then it's all like people from the company talking nonstop for like 28 minutes or an hour. In the last 2 minutes, okay, anybody have any questions? Okay, we're wrapping it up. See you in 12 months.
Right. Look, if it's a traditional, I've been thinking about a thing that they need to accomplish, they're going to think about it in a traditional sort of way. Nothing wrong with that. I love those guys for, in that space for doing that sort of work. I love marketers for thinking about marketing. I'd love engineers for thinking about engineers, right? They're engineering. That's what they're supposed to be doing. That's the goal, right? Our goal is to make sure we're representing the community and designing social experiences in ways that are actually successful. And, so much of our work, as you well know, I don't need to explain this to you, so much of our work is fighting for that, for those social dynamics, for people who don't understand them, right? How do we create business value out of letting others talk to each other, and how do we sell that, right? Instead of how to,
Yeah.
whether or not it's fair and accurate. An events person can say, well, I understand or we have at least enough history of accepting, let's say, that if we get that point up there, we've got 12 hours worth of us talking to you with a 5-minute bio break in between each session. We can expect that there's business value there. Can you prove it? Well, no, but we've been doing it this way for 30 years. So of course it's that's what we do. Yeah, but why? Right. I feel like so much of our community job as community people is just asking those hard questions over and over again on behalf of the people that we're trying to support, right? Why are we doing this? Where's the chance for them to have a social experience? Why are social experiences important? Let me tell you why. If you do this, this, and this, then it's much more likely that they're actually going to want to renew with us because we're helping to build part of their identity, their sense of self, right? And if you get somebody to believe that I'm a Microsoft guy, not an SAP guy or whatever, it's a lot harder to get somebody to agree to switching from one to the other, right? Because it's wrapped up in your identity, and that identity comes from those social connections as much as anything else. Because I can give up software stacks all day long, right? And it may be annoying to me, but at the end of the day, well, okay, fine. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. I get paid either way. It's really hard for me to give up people. Really hard. Whether those people are the official community manager, the executives that we've met and know, whether it's my other fellow members, right? Whether it's the team that I work with that are also in the community, it's hard to give up people.
Right. And one of I think kind of the big kind of lessons there too with Lego, and kind of tell a lot of community professionals, is what are your community members already doing? What are they trying to do? Because there is this inclination, you come in and you're like, let's get into these meeting rooms and figure it out, right? Or come up for stuff. And if the community's in yesterday land and you're building tomorrow land, right? It's like, why aren't they all like coming over here? It's like, so a lot of our work is, when you came into Lego, you didn't say, hey, I'm going to just recreate the wheel and everything. Let me complement what they're already doing and build upon that. And I just think that's like such a important, valuable lesson. What are they already doing, or what are they trying to do? And being like dialed into that versus like you're trying to write this whole other script and whole other world that they may not even work for them. So I just thought that was like so amazing that you connected the dots at Lego to do that.
Yeah. And every company I've worked with since, I try as much as I can to get them to think about the oh God, I can't remember what the model's called, but basically the model of home bases, outposts, and passports, right? That everything that you're doing is about home base. That's our properties. That's what we build. It's our .com. It may be our formal official community. Outposts are places like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, where it's somebody else's site, but I largely control my experience there within their guidelines, of course. But it's up to me to drive that content. And then passports, things like third-party forums that are run by somebody else, and I get a passport to join them every once in a while. I get to come into their experience, participate as just really any other member, and really thinking about where is it we're spending our time, because most people's professor business hat says all in home base. Well, maybe we'll extend into passports, into outposts, right? Into maybe we'll set up a social channel. But getting into how do we participate where other people are? How do we even go into other people's outposts and participate, right? How do we go into an Instagram channel or a forum that is run by somebody completely not us, and actively participate, right? So that we're being part of that community, not just talking to that part of the community. That's a good discussion for all of us to be having about how we actually approach some of these strategies and content plans and engagement plans and whatnot.
Nice. And so we just got a few minutes here left. So just two questions to wrap up. We've got the original community guy. There might be other community guys out there since, but this is the OG community guy, Jake
I own
McKee,
the domain.
Community5. Be sure to look up Dinner 5. Check that out. And just kind of two things. One, it's kind of, a lot of people, recession's kind of on the top of their mind. Other people will get kind of this like imposter syndrome, things like this. So kind of just to lead us out, like any words of inspiration for community professionals? And then secondly, kind of a wild card question. And we haven't even talked about this before, but any thoughts on the movie E.T. because it is its 40th anniversary? So those kind of two things here don't relate at all, but curious to get your thoughts on.
Boy, so I'll tell you quickly. E.T. The 40-year thing makes me gives me a little palpitation there. But E.T.'s a funny movie because it's the first movie I remember seeing and thinking, I'm very impressed by the technicals, not just the the overall experience or the storyline. Like I remember being very impressed with Spielberg's directing, right? Like just how things flowed and the way that dialogue interacted with other dialogue. And so I've loved movies since that movie because of that movie in a lot of ways. So it's I hadn't really thought about that until you just asked that question, but because I was trying to remember back to what it was. Well, that was the first movie that I went, huh, movie making. It's not just a thing that happens, right? So the other question, words of inspiration. So I'll say that it was real easy the last 2 years to convince ourselves that everything had changed. Right, the pandemic showed us that that we were in a whole new world, completely new world of community where everything was going to work great. Everybody was going to love community, that we were going to suddenly be valued, that we were suddenly going to be, forevermore impressive in the world, and we turned and we said, there's a lot of hiring going on. Of course, we're stuck here. No, none of this is going to contract. It's contracting. It's natural. It's expected. If you find yourself in a layoff, it's not something you've done wrong necessarily, right? Like it was to be expected that in a time of crisis, we threw a lot of resources at trying to get through that crisis, and now we have to get back to a new normal. And what I've been telling people who've reached out about, how do I get a job somewhere else? I will say that I will say two things. One is your community skills apply to every part of the business that exists, right? You've learned a lot about product design and product development by being a community person. You've learned a lot about support. You've learned a lot about marketing. You've learned a lot about business tactics. If you've done any community work at all, right? How much you've learned, well, that's up to you. But the reality is you've somehow touched on all of those things. So, what does that mean to your job search? How does that mean to your story? And, the point I'll leave on, and I do have to drop, but the point I'll leave on is the task right now is not just to update your resume. It's to figure out what your story is, right? And anybody can look at a resume, anybody can write a resume, but if you don't have a clear indication of what you're trying to tell somebody about who you are as a professional, it's real hard for them to understand why you're going to be such a good match for their business, why you're competent, right? Use all those community telling skills that you have built up being a community professional and getting people to understand complex ideas with joy and passion, and turn that into yourself. And the last piece of advice I'll give to wrap us up is I am redoing my website right now. I hate my website. I designed it in a flurry, years and years ago. When I did the rebranding, I haven't updated it yet, but I'm doing it. But I had to hire a copywriter for myself. I'm in the process of writing a book. I've written other books. I write tons of words, it feels like, every day. And I still have a really hard time telling my story. So I'm on the phone later tomorrow afternoon, as a matter of fact, to have another session with the copywriter where he's going to ask me some questions. I'm going to give him some answers, and he's going to help me come up with what that story is. I tell stories for a living for other people. I can't do it for myself. Get some help. when you're writing your resume, when you're telling your story, start talking to somebody that you know and trust, and just ask them to pick up themes, ask them to summarize for you. And you'd be surprised at how good that will be at helping you to say how badass you really are. Because all of us are taught in this American society not to talk about how badass we are. And that's exactly the wrong thing to be doing at a time that you're trying to compete for jobs or look for new jobs. So, and feel free, Jake at jakemckee.com is my email. If you get stuck, you need some help, and you're in that job search, you've been laid off, I'm happy to help however I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jake. We know you got to run. That inspired me. So just I want to stand up, but then it's like doesn't make sense. I'm like sitting, but yeah, we got to get some applause. That was, whoo! It's good to get those kind of halftime locker room pep speech. It's like we're down by 20, but Jake is talking. Now we can go conquer the world. So thanks so much for sharing that. It's really amazing. Thanks for your time. Have a great rest of your day, and just really, this has really been amazing to reminisce and catch up. Just so much advice,
Yeah.
and everybody get out there with Dinner 5, connect with Jake, one of the best in the business, and everybody have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thanks for having me. Drop me an email. I'll give you that copy.